What's going on, junkies? This is the Daily Wealth Junkies Show, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Brandon Dukin here with Will Harvey, and we've got an awesome guest in store for you today. But first, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you're not missing any of our daily episodes, and join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealthjunkies. Will, let's introduce our guest for the day.
Yep. Thanks so much, Brandon. Today we have Rob Chavez on the show, and he owns a diversified portfolio of real estate companies. He did 118 million in sales volume for his brokerage side of things last year, and they're looking to double, and they're doing some awesome stuff. So Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show. And with that, can you just give the listeners a little bit more about your background and what got you to where you are today?
Sure thing, man. Hey, first and foremost, I love the name of your podcast. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Wealth Junkies. I'm so jealous. I wish I had that one. Like, I'm all about helping our team and our people build wealth in their life. So that totally resonates with me.
Awesome. Glad you like it.
This is the one thing that I beat you to. Everything else, it seems like you're first too.
Thanks, man. Well, I'm a little older than you. That's just how it works, right? So let me, I'll kind of take you back, right? I grew up in a foreign service family. My dad was a diplomat for the U.S. I lived in a bunch of countries, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Mexico, Argentina, a bunch of places in the U.S., Texas, California, Arlington, Australia, right? So I kind of grew up as a foreign service brat. And so what does that do, right? Like you have to learn how to like meet new people, integrate into new cultures. You have to learn how to adapt. It's not an easy thing to do, right? Because you're constantly moving every 2 years, but I absolutely loved it, right? And you and I were talking a little bit before we jumped on here. You were talking about how you started off selling golf balls. Well, I started off selling mangoes, right?
Nice.
I think I was like in first grade, and I would climb these trees in Costa Rica, and I'd pick the mangoes, and then I would sell them to the older kids, and until like the school saw me like a 2-story tree trying to grab this monster mango, and they were like, "Get that out!" Right? But that was my first entrepreneurial venture, and I don't think I've ever shared that story, by the way.
Oh,
That
was my
awesome.
first entrepreneurial venture, and they killed it. They killed it early on, right?
Man, all those haters out there, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, oh man, they killed it early on. So anyhow, fast forward, all the moving. What it did was I had to learn how to integrate into different cultures, and the easiest way for me to do that was through sports, right? I was a little athletic, somewhat athletic. I was a little guy, but I'm fast, I'm strong. I think I'm bigger than I am. So I'm fearless when it comes to that. And so sports helped me kind of adapt. I'd go to a new country and adapt, right? But through sports. And I discovered wrestling, right? So wrestling is one of those sports where, it requires so much dedication. It requires this level of intensity that most people aren't willing to give. And, it's a thankless sport. There's no glory in it. There's no money after you do it. But I loved how it made me feel. It made me feel accomplished, right? It was hard. And something about it being hard resonated with me. And I knew that not everybody could do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I wrestled all through high school. I was a state champion in high school. I wrestled all through college.
No kidding.
D1.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, D1 was like a whole nother thing. I ended up winning the conference at American University here in DC. So I came back here. It was local.
No kidding.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
And I learned some valuable lessons, right? My goal was to be a conference champion, which was a small goal. It should have been to be national champion, All-American.
Yeah, set the goals high.
I learned some valuable lessons, right? I hit what I was aiming for in that process, and I was thinking too small, right? So whatever, that was like a learning lesson. But the other thing I learned in college was that I was a psych major, right? And I'd finished all my credits by the time I was a junior, so I got to take all these electives. And in the process of taking these electives, I took a personal finance class. And this personal finance class was just like the basics, like what's a checking account, what's a savings account, like what's credit card, what's a credit score. And I remember thinking, I'm a senior in college, and this was like, nobody ever talked to me about this. Like my parents never talked about money, right? Like I had no concept of money. I was like, this should be the first class
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
that you have to take when you enter into school, right?
Yeah.
Not that I fell into this class, right? It was crazy to me. Well, in there, the professor said, if you plan on being anywhere for longer than 3 years, I suggest that you buy a house. And remember, I've been moving my whole life, and I was like, I'm not moving anymore. I want to plant roots. And so that language resonated with me. And as soon as I graduated, I started figuring out a way, how could I buy a house? How could I afford a house? How could I buy a house? And then, and I guess they call it house hacking now, right? I bought a little townhouse, and I moved in a couple of my buddies into the townhouse, and they ended up paying the majority of all my mortgage, right? I remember my mortgage payment being like $1,200 a month. And I think my portion of it was like $350. And I was like,
That's awesome.
dude, this is awesome,
Jealous.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I need to do this again and again and again, right? So that was my first experience with that, right? And I was lucky that when I was in college, I got to work for an entrepreneur who showed me what life looked like, building a very massive business, right? A big business. And his name was Alan Meltzer. He's a locally very known in the world of insurance, right? The guy is amazing. And I worked for him for a couple of years, and that was a blessing. But then around 1998, I graduated in 97. So I worked for Alan in 96, 97, and part of 98. I got approached by a friend of mine who said, I'm starting a recruiting business, and I was hungry to do my own thing, right? I was hungry to be a business owner. I didn't know what business. I just didn't see myself in insurance. You know, fast forward 20 years now, I now understand the power of insurance, but then I didn't, right? I just like
Residuals.
Yeah, residuals, right? Like that's so powerful. But then I was like, life insurance, health insurance, it just sounded so boring.
It's
Yeah.
boring stuff. That's what my dad does. And
Oh,
you can
yeah,
see I'm
but-
not in the family business.
Yeah.
It's an amazing business, right? It's an amazing business. But residuals, right, is the power of that business. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I wanted to go out and do something. And if you guys remember, we probably don't because you're younger than me, right? This was the start of like the dot-com boom. So there was all these technology companies hiring people all over the DC area, right? And so I kind of wedged myself in there with my business partner, and we started placing a lot of tech salespeople all in the DC metro market. And we grew that company, to a small 7-figure business. I ran that with him for 7 years. And then he bought me out in 2005 so that I could pursue my passion, which was real estate full time, right?
Okay.
So from 98 to 2005, I was with him. And I was learning how to hustle and learning how to sell and learning how to interview people and land clients and do all that stuff.
That's huge.
But all along the way, I was buying real estate. And
Nice.
And during that time, though, it was like, it was during the time where like, can you fog a mirror? Is your credit score good enough?
Right.
We'll give you a loan, right? And so, my wife and I, what we would do is we would buy a townhouse. We'd move into it. We'd fix it up. We'd live in it for about 6 months. And then we'd rent it, and then we just rinsed and repeat, right?
Love
And
that.
I think we did that 5 times in 4 years. And my wife said, stop, enough. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. We'd had our baby girl in 2002. And she's like, we need to be a little bit more stable. And I was like, okay, right? Because I was having fun doing that. And so in 2005, I decided to do this real estate thing full time. And I wanted to buy apartment buildings. So I took a David Lindell course, which was how to create 10,000 in in positive cash flow a month buying apartment buildings. That was my first kind of like apartment building thing. What led me down that path was, I'm sure you guys have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Earlier,
Of course.
I've been buying
Yep.
townhouses because that's what started getting my mind, into buying real estate assets, right? But here's the deal. I left a cushy, I was making a couple $100,000 a year as a recruiter. I was recently married. I was recently had a little baby girl. We just bought the single family home in McLean. And my gut was just telling me I didn't want to do the recruiting business. I wanted to be in the real estate business. So I walked in one day and I just told my wife, hey, I think I want to start a real estate business. And she said, okay, let's do it. Now, that sounds
That's awesome that she was supportive.
You
She
probably
was supportive. That
don't hear
sounds
that too
great.
often.
Yeah.
The truth is, it was really, really dumb because from the perspective of, we didn't have a plan. I didn't have a model. I didn't have a mentor. I'm just like, I'm going to go buy houses and I'm going to buy enough of these houses, create an income. There wasn't a plan, right? But there was lots of hustle. And so we started buying small apartments and duplexes and triplexes and quads 2 hours away from where we live in a little town called Cumberland, Maryland, right? And we would buy those, we'd fix them up, and we wanted to keep them. The whole idea was passive income, but I soon realized, because I didn't have a plan, shoot, I need to own a lot of these to kind of pay for my lifestyle. And in the meantime, I need to actually generate some earned income. I need like some now money. So I started buying these apartment buildings and then selling them to investors turnkey. And then what happened was these investors said, this is great, but who's going to manage these properties for us? Can you manage the properties for us? And we were like, sure, right? We'll do it, without really having any knowledge of how to do it well, right? And before we knew it, we had 300 assets under management.
Wow.
All low income, 2 hours away from where we lived. It was a show, man. It was a show.
Just figure it out on the way.
We're just figuring it out. And that was the path, right? That's what got me started. And then what happened was we did that from 2005 to 2007. And I remember, I think it was like Christmas 2007. I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way of doing this, right? We've got all these properties under management. It's all lower income, lower dollar. I feel like we're risking a lot for a little, because the average profit for us in that area was like $15,000. It was 2 hours away from where we lived. Remember, we have a little baby girl who, we're dragging with us, to in these smelly houses and, just all sorts of stuff. Right. And I'm like, I looked up, this was kind of like, if you remember 2007, the market started sliding here in the DC metro area. And we recognized that, we saw that. And I said, I should think about getting my license, my realtor's license, only because I've got all these deals that like we can't buy, but maybe we could somehow get referral fees for these deals, right? And so I got my license as just like a default thing. And what happened was, I just happened to be at Barnes & Noble one day, and I saw a book, when Barnes & Noble existed, right?
Yeah, those aren't out there. I don't see too many of those.
You're dating yourself here.
Yeah.
I know. But I picked up a book, and it was the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, written by Gary Keller. And when I read the book, it literally like hit me like a ton of bricks, because I realized it wasn't a book about real estate. It was a book about business, right? Remember, I had owned a recruiting business before. I was like, man, if I had this book when I was a recruiter, it would have helped us, right? It's a book for any business person, right? So I'm like, I don't know who this Gary Keller is. I don't know who Keller Williams is, but I'm going to find the nearest brokerage. I'm going to hang my license there. And I'm going to try to understand that side of the business a little bit, right?
Okay.
So that was my first exposure to the brokerage agent business. Remember, I'm just thinking investor the whole time.
Right.
Well, in 2008, right? So this was now the beginning of 2008. you're starting to see foreclosure signs and short sales everywhere. Everything was just like, I mean, the shit had hit the fan, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crazy time. And I remember seeing these townhouses that had peaked at like 320, that now were like $175, and then $160, and then $150. And I remember, wow, $150. The rents are like $1,500 a month. That's like the 1% rule. When was the
Yeah.
last time that happened in the DC metro market, right? I went back in the MLS. I hadn't seen that in a while. And so I turned to a friend of mine that had some capital, and I just happened to mention it to him. I just happened to say, hey, this is interesting. Him and I had bought some properties before, some student rentals in Frostburg University, and we'd done well on those. And he said, well, man, if you find them, if you fix them, and if you manage them, I will fund them, and we'll split everything 50-50. And I was like, done. Let's do it.
He had pretty deep pockets.
He did. He
Okay.
did. And
That's
the
cool.
way I met him was just how relationships matter. I had met him as a recruiter, and he had referred me a lot of his friends, and he's a hard money lender now in the Virginia, DC area, right? And he's super uber successful, great quality of life, brilliant guy, super smart guy. And he had deep pockets that he's totally self-made. And he said, yeah, I'll fund it, right? And so we proceeded to just like buy like one a month. That was kind of like our model. And we look back now and we wish we'd bought like 100 of them, right?
Yeah, right. In hindsight.
But it was a scary time, right? Like it was a scary time. And so that was really the launch of really kind of our wealth building, right? We had done it before a little bit with my wife, but now it was like, okay, we're doing this for real now.
Yeah,
right?
just start to scale it up.
So you weren't flipping these. These were buying holds.
Those were buying wholes,
Okay.
right? We started flipping a lot of them in 2009 and 2010 when the market started coming back. We held all of those. We still own those, by the way. We're about to
nice.
him and I we're about to pay off 2 this week.
Nice.
All of the mortgages are like at $16,000-$17,000, and we're like, let's just pay off 2. Let's snowball, right? Like let's just take the additional cash flow and start paying off the other ones. And so that's, it's been a decade of doing that, right? It didn't happen overnight, but you wake up a decade later and you're like, wow, man, these things are almost paid, right?
That's pretty cool.
And so, but 2009, 2010, where we're doing a lot of flips, just to take a step back, in 2007, 2008, one of the things I wanted to do when I came back to the DC metro market was I wanted to get in relationship with other people that thought like me. They were investors that were on the path to building wealth, right? And so I started like an investment group, a mastermind, right? It's now called the Grid Investor Network. It's the largest in the DC metro area. We've got 10,000 members. We've got, I think 11 different chapters. We even have some chapters down in Florida.
It's an awesome group. I mean, Brandon can speak on that. I've never been there. I need to get out there, but Brandon has been there, and our CEO of our company has, and it's awesome.
Thanks, man. And that just came out of, that was just like, I just want to meet cool people like you guys and talk about wealth, right?
That's the best conversation to have.
That was it. So that's kind of the journey. And what happened was along the way around 2009, Keller Williams started really influencing me. Gary Keller really started influencing me about the power of building teams and building an agent business as a cash machine so that I could take that cash and then use that cash to buy assets. And that became the model, right? Okay,
how did he influence you?
Well, you start going to family reunions, which is Keller large conferences. You start meeting people there that are doing hundreds of transactions, now thousands of transactions. They own brokerages, they have teams, they own assets, they have profit sharing. Your mind really just starts opening up. Like,
right.
There's people that are doing some incredible things, right?
Right.
And their agent team is just one of them, right? It's just a business, and that fuels the other stuff, right?
Right.
And so I got on the journey of building this team, and now we have teams, and I use that income to pay down debt and to buy more assets, and that kind
That's
of
so cool.
became the model, right? So
Yeah. And
that was
that's where you are now, and that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
that's the story in a nutshell, man. Like, and
Love
I
that.
feel like we're just getting started. Like, this is like, okay,
That's such a great
we have a
feeling, isn't
platform,
it?
and we're about to scale this thing up. So.
Yeah, I was going to say right before we talked, you had you mentioned you got several meetings today, and they all sounded like they were growth meetings and things that are just going to help you guys get even bigger. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to rewind a little bit and kind of unpack the story here. So when you were after college, it sounds so 98 was when you were leaving the insurance world and you were going into that startup. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. The recruiting company. So, how was that? I mean, were you passionate about it when you started?
I was.
Okay.
I was. That's a great question. I was passionate about it, and I was also, it was a huge learning curve for me because I'd never really sold. I wasn't a natural salesperson. My business partner was really just charismatic, um, an unbelievable connector, really great at rapport building. Remember, I grew up the son of a diplomat, which was kind of like, hey, kids, be quiet. You're in the corner. You look good. You dress good, right? But it wasn't like an entrepreneurial household. Although my parents do have some entrepreneurial blood to them. Like, they would buy houses every time we went to a different country. So, there is credit there. But we didn't have business discussions, right? There was never discussions about negotiation. Anyhow, I just think my friend, he's my best friend. He's still my best friend today.
Oh, that's great.
Was just better at that stuff than I was. And so for the first 6 months, I remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this. This is really hard, because I had to sell, and I'd never really sold before. I'd waited tables, but this is, I'm selling to directors of sales and VPs of sales, and I'm meeting salespeople. So, but here's what I learned during the course of that business, right? And this is why I fell out of love with that business, was that as a recruiter, the type of business that we have, which was headhunting, it's fee for service. You make a placement, and then you get paid a commission on it, and then it's done, right? So you're starting at zero every single month. There's no residual income, right? And I had approached him about wanting to start a consulting practice so that we could get residual income, because all the biggest firms out there had these consulting practices. And he doesn't remember this. I told him, let's do this, make me majority owner. I'll go hustle and grind and build it up. But he didn't want to do it. And so I was like, okay. By that time, I'd read a lot of Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'd taken the David Lindell classes. I'd attended a lot of RIAs. So I'd spent a lot of time learning and absorbing information and going out and taking action on like individual townhouses. And I was like, okay, well then I'm going to go do something else. And,
so you just realized, like what in learning and educating yourself with all those books, you just realized what I'm doing here is kind of the exact opposite of what Rich Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's talking about, Dave Lindahl. Yep. And that's ultimately what led you to say, you know what, I kind of want to cut the cord here and move on.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I love,
cool.
my best friend. He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's an awesome entrepreneur. That business is still exists. They do super well. He's a wealthy guy. He lends a lot of money on projects, but it just wasn't me,
Yeah.
So Rob, you mentioned for about the first 6 months, it was hard and it was scary because you weren't as good, as a salesperson. You never done it before. How did you kind of get over that fear of selling to people?
I went to a training, and the guy's name was Peter Lefkowitz, and he had what he called the Morgan methodology of recruiting, right? And what he did was he laid out a very specific activity-based, numbers-based business plan, right? X amount of interviews, X amount of job requirements, X amount of send outs was going to equal, right, a certain amount of income. So what he did was he gave me focus on what mattered. It was like,
Mhm.
hey, I need to do this lead generation piece to get interviews, and I need 20 of those a month. And then I need a certain amount of lead generation to get like 5 send outs. And that means I need to call X amount of clients. And then I need to job match a certain amount of jobs to candidates. And I need to get at least 14 send outs. So what he did was he gave me this predictability, right, in numbers and activity. And all I did was believe what he told me.
Mhm.
And he said I needed to do, these amount of calls. And I just started tracking, writing it down, right? And saying, okay, what were my results? How many interviews did I get today? How many send outs did I get? And how many new job orders did I get? And then what happened was the next year, I was the biggest producer. Like
No
I
kidding.
beat my friend who's way more talented than I am at this business, only because I worked harder and I focused on the numbers, not because I was better than him, but because I just grinded and focused more on activity.
Right.
That's awesome.
It's kind of like if you throw enough, it'll stick, right? It's just
That's right.
Yeah, and when you
grab a handful.
reverse, right, when you reverse engineer things, instead of saying I want to make 200 grand this year, 500 grand this year, whatever it is, it's like, okay, how can we reverse engineer that to figure out how many phone calls I need to make, how many meetings I need to set, and when you
Right.
do that, I know my prior days in the mortgage business, I would business plan for the next year, and when I started doing that, it almost made it made it so much easier, and it kind of took the pressure off to where everything was in my control. And I know that if I'm not making those phone calls, those numbers aren't going to happen. And tracking
That's
it,
right.
I'm just saying, if you don't track it, you can't improve it. So I love how you track things. That's such a great that's a great lesson right
Well,
there.
I had direct control over the activity, not over the outcome. So I
absolutely.
Bingo.
just focused on the activity.
Yeah, and
Right.
it becomes a numbers game at that point, and
Yeah.
numbers don't lie.
That's right.
So very
That's right.
cool, very cool.
So, Rob, it sounds like most of the stuff most of the deals and stuff you've done have turned out pretty well. Is there one deal that sticks out that just tore you apart and spit
Of
you out?
course.
Yeah, can you
Let's
talk
hear
about
it.
some of those? Or
Of course. This was a triplex that I had purchased, and I had wholesaled it to a friend of mine, right? And uh, and I essentially I made like 20 grand in the wholesale, and I said, he turned around and said, hey, that's great, I love this asset, but can you fix it up for me, right? Can I use your crews, and can you fix it up for me?
Mhm.
And I was like, sure, we'll do that, right? And so what happened was I'd given him a scope of work and I said, okay, I think the budget's going to be at $70,000 to do this project, right? And man, there's so many learning lessons in this project. It's not even funny. So it was this triplex, right? It was a big, monstrous triplex. We get
Cumberland?
into this what's that?
In Cumberland?
In Cumberland, right?
Okay.
And so I'd already made money on this thing, right? I'd made money. I'd made our wholesale fee. And now I gave him the scope of work in this budget and said, okay, we're going to do this budget. And when we get into it, my wife and I had gone away for a couple of weeks. We had this crew that had been working with us. This is a crew that we had gobbled together that was doing work for us. It wasn't a separate, company doing the work, right?
Yeah.
These people were on our payroll, which that's a whole nother thing that, thank God, everything we worked out with all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was I came and we were more than halfway through the budget, right? Like we'd gone away for a couple of weeks. We had a foreman that had done good for us on some other jobs. And when I came back, I felt I was like going to throw up because we were, I think, $40,000 into this $70,000 budget, and one of them wasn't even finished yet and
Oh,
complete.
wow.
One of the one of the units wasn't even done. And what he had done was he brought all these people in at the same time, and he didn't organize his people. There wasn't a systematic. It was just like people were just working on
chaos.
stuff, right? It was chaos. Come to find out, the guy's like on drugs, like he had become
No
a
kidding.
user again, right? And we were getting robbed blind, right? Because we had pretty much said, oh, you guys need material. Oh, you need more material. Go to Home Depot. We would like, the Home Depot would call us. They'd buy the material. They're probably taking stuff,
Wow.
home, because we had no controls over anything, right? And so anyhow, I fired everybody. I got them all, off the job site. I think by this time we were like 50,000 into the $70,000 budget, and we hadn't even finished one, right? So
That's
I went
insane.
went and hired this other GC, pretty much said, please bail me out, like help me, bail me out. The guy bailed me out. Well, he finished the job, right? But it cost me another $100,000 to finish the job, right?
Wow.
And I remember I had told my friend it was going to be $70,000 for the budget. So I turned to him and said, hey man, I totally blew this. I messed up. I go, I want to buy you out of this project because you didn't sign up for this.
Right.
And right, it's the right thing to do. And he thought at first that I was buying the project because I thought it was some kind of awesome deal and I was going to hold it for the long term, right? And like, I was like, dude, no, this thing is so messed up, right? I am so over budget on this thing, and you didn't sign up for this, so let me just buy it back from you. I'll pay you a little bit of a premium on it, right? And you'll be done with it. And I'm sorry that I messed up the project, right? And so he said, okay, cool. Like, once he figured out that I wasn't trying to snake the deal from him, right? So fast forward today, I still own that property today, right? I will never be able to recoup that money. I mean, yeah, it's not on a great street. It's probably on a good day, 75, 80,000 bucks.
Got it.
I'm into it for, I think 170,
Yeah.
$180,000. It's an older building. It's always costing me money. It's like a constant. I at some point I just got to cut the cord on that.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, why are we still holding on to it?
I just got to cut the cord on that. My wife every month's reminding me. But but I learned a ton, right? I learned a ton through that experience. It didn't crush me. I survived it. It's a fun story.
What I think is so cool there, and a lesson that I heard from you telling that is you said do the right thing, and that investor, you messed up. You could have went to them and say, look, I blew it. I messed up. Sorry. And it is what it is.
Yeah, I could have left him holding the bag.
Right. But the fact that you did that and you saved your reputation, would you agree that that's worth so much more than the money that you lost there?
Yeah, it wasn't so much my reputation. I just felt bad. I wouldn't want to leave him holding the bag on something like that when it was my fault. So I'd call it more like personal responsibility, right? I was like, I'm personally responsible for a bad outcome. So I would want it to hurt me, not hurt you, because it was my fault, right?
Yeah.
So reputation had less to do with it and more just about personal responsibility, right?
That's great.
And how early on in your real estate career was this deal?
Well, from full time. So I think that was like, remember I had gone full time in 2005. I think it was like 2006. So it was early.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great that you brushed it off and moved on.
Yeah. Yeah. It sucked. It still sucks.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So when you started the brokerage, when you learned about all that, how come you didn't become an individual agent? I just want to hear. I know that we met a while back, and you talked about how you wanted to treat it like a business. any listener out there, I think it's so important if you treat things
Mhm.
systematically and like a business, you're going to be able to run it so much more efficient and scale it. I want to know what your mindset was and why you weren't
Yeah, I mean,
the individual agent.
well, I did start as an individual agent, right?
Okay.
Like I was the human engine in the beginning, right? I took listings, I worked the buyers, I put the signs up in the yard, I did that, but I knew that that wasn't where I was going to be long term. So I quickly hired an administrative assistant who
That's
freed me
awesome.
from a lot of the operations, and then we quickly hired buyers agents, and then we hired more, and so I was the economic engine for many years, right? It took me longer than most who are on the path, I would say, to extract myself from production because it's kind of a scary thing. You've built this big animal and you are such a big producer,
Right.
right? Um, and so, but I finally had to say, okay, I'm building a business and I'm working through people and the good thing is I've done it, right? Like I've built it from scratch. I know what, it's like to be the buyer's agent. I know what it's like to be
Right.
the seller's agent. I know what it's like to build my own listings and create my own flyers and stage my own houses and put my own signs up. And like, I know it. I've done it while I've renovated houses and while I've, run meetups. And so, excuses, I don't, you know, I don't like a
Yeah.
lot of excuses out there
I totally
because
agree.
Yeah,
done it.
I had a football coach who, I'm sure other people have heard this, but he said excuses are like buttholes. Everyone has them and they stink. So it's just,
Thanks
A
for that
football
visual.
coach would say that,
yeah.
right?
But
Only a
it's,
football coach would say that.
yeah. So, but it's true. An excuse is an excuse. It is what it is. And
Yeah.
That's right.
it's just,
Well, what would you say to the person that is an agent and maybe they're just getting started, or maybe they're more established and
Yeah.
they're scaling up and they just feel stuck. They feel like the hamster on the wheel, and they want to do something like you did, where they hire other agents and admin. And what would you tell that person?
First thing that they need to do is they need to go get a lot of listings. That is the inventory of the business, right? That is, and you have to you got to take a lot of those listings, and then you have to start reading a lot of leadership books because if you really want to build a business, you're gonna have to become a good leader. So by taking a lot of listings, you're showing that you're a good self leader, right? Because to take listings, you have to control your schedule, you have to prospect, you have to create a value proposition, you have to deliver right on all of that,
Right.
and then start reading leadership books about building business. Read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, read the Millionaire Real Estate Investor book, but very quickly be very cognizant that you need administrative leverage that's handling all the 80% that doesn't get you paid, right? Paperwork. In our business, the 20% that makes us all the money is lead generations and listings, and the other 80% is just kind of fulfillment. So you've got to pass that fulfillment piece on to somebody else who does it better than you, because there's
Right.
people that just do it better than you, right? And while you're on this path of building that, you need to be cognizant that you need to take this cash and you need to buy real estate investments, or you need to invest in yourself, right? Or you need to invest in other people. Those are kind of like the options that you have. When you make a dollar,
Yep.
you have a decision to make with that dollar, right? Am I going to reinvest it in me? Am I going to reinvest it in the business? Or am I going to invest it in some savings or some kind of investment asset vehicle, right?
Right.
Best investment first is in yourself, right?
mm-hmm.
And then from there, you need to be making sure that you're saving enough money for a rainy day, and then start buying additional assets, right? But I would run it like a business. So you need to have a P&L, which means you got to close the books at the end of every month. You got to ask yourself, did I make a profit, not make a profit? Okay, why didn't I make a profit? Why did I make a profit? What got me the best ROI, right? Just, you have to run it like a
That's
business.
so good. Yeah, I love that. and especially the whole thing, use it to churn, the 30, 60, 90-day income. I remember you talking about that a while back,
Oh yeah.
and then
Yeah.
use that to feed other investments that are going to grow your wealth. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Well, Rob, it looks like we're going to jump into our Moments of Truth segment here. It's the same 7
Okay.
questions we ask all our guests. And I'm just going to kick it off with the first one here. Who is your success role model?
Gary Keller.
It's awesome.
How come?
Because he has built $1 billion empire, and he's done it without sacrificing family, and by empowering other people to live their biggest lives, right? So it
Yeah.
wasn't about working harder for him. It was about working through people and working smarter and being a teacher, an educator, a coach, and always focusing on us, right? And about making us better and smarter. Just a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Just an amazing leader, right? Amazing leader.
Yeah. That's great. What is your biggest success? Personal or business or both?
Biggest success. I have I have like different compartments, right? Like family. I think the biggest success. I've got a little girl. I've been married 18 years. She's healthy. She's smart. She's launching. She's engaged. She's got a first job. Like, so as
that's
a dad,
awesome.
right? I feel like she is our biggest success, right?
That's so cool.
And she's amazing, right? And it hasn't been easy for her. She was diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 14, right? And so, which is a late diagnosis.
Wow.
She's a brilliant person, but she's gone through a lot. And watching her grow and flourish, and now become a strong, powerful human being.
How old is she now?
She's 17.
Oh, nice. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. That I would say is my wife and I's biggest success, right?
I love that.
From a business standpoint, it's been my business partner, Matt. He was my first assistant, right? He runs our Gainesville location. He's now on his 4th house. He paid off a 3rd house that he ever bought, $300,000 house, and he paid it off in 1 year, right?
Dang.
And I'd like to take credit for that, but he did it, but I helped plant the seeds to help him do that, right?
Yeah.
But that, and he's got an unbelievable business in Gainesville. Like, to me, that's another, I feel fulfilled for watching his success, right?
Yeah.
And I want to replicate that with members on our team. And so I consider that a massive success, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
And that, like, success is just a weird thing, right? Like, on the journey to this, there's lots of like failures and there's lots of things. It's like, I did a video the other day on fulfillment, right? I think the biggest thing that I can tell you is I just feel fulfilled on the journey. And there is, I don't want to say that I feel successful in any one area, because it's like I'm always just working at being better, right?
Yeah.
And building, right?
That's so cool.
I've created stability in our family, in our household, in our income, in our relationships, and I feel fulfilled. And I'm wanting to help others do that, right? So
yeah, that's awesome.
That's
it's
it.
like the hierarchy of needs. Once you're good, you got a secure thing going for yourself. It's like, now how can I pour into others and watch them grow and succeed? And that's got to be
100%.
really, really cool to see for you.
Yeah, man, 100%.
So, Rob, what does a typical day for you look like?
Doing some form of lead generation in the morning, right? Lead generation these days could be creating videos on Facebook, Facebook Live. Could be interviewing people, right? For what, we run a blog called Rest and Digs, which is where I interview business owners in the community and help kind of, help them brand themselves in the community, to picking up the phone and making phone calls and scheduling appointments for different people on my team, talent. But the majority of what I do for lead generation now is looking for and identifying talent within the business. Right?
Nice.
So lead generation in the morning, lunch with key people, right, in my life, and then appointments in the afternoon. And then family, I get home around 6:30, 7. If it's a meetup, it might be 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night.
All right.
Very cool.
That's it. It's just my day schedule out like that.
That's I can tell you're a Gary Keller guy. The whole be a maker in the morning and a manager in the afternoon. That's
100%.
That's good. I love it.
Right.
What's your favorite quote?
That which does not kill me only makes me stronger. Take it in, baby.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's the first time we've heard that one on here, actually.
What's funny is that I look back, Nietzsche's got another quote, and I can't quote it off the top of my head, but it essentially says, hey, I wish you misfortune and struggle and difficulty in your life, because it's the only way to really know whether or not you're worth anything, which is the ability to endure, right? And so it's a cool quote. That's not the actual quote, right? But that's kind of what it's about. But when I was in high school, my senior year yearbook, I looked at it the other day. That quote, that which does not kill me only makes me stronger, was the quote on there, right?
Nice.
And there's this whole concept of being in. You search Tom Bilyeu.
They grow back stronger than they were before. It's kind of similar.
Yep.
Rob, what are some of your hobbies?
I love to fish. I love to hike. I love to camp. Kind of an outdoors guy, which is, it's funny because people on my team are like, really?
I would have never guessed that. No, seriously. Yeah. I was thinking that same thing.
Yeah. I grew up that way. And so I grew up that way and I enjoy it. I love being outdoors. I don't do it enough. Right.
Right.
For the longest time, people would ask me, what's my hobby? And I'd be like, buying houses.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's my job, unfortunately.
I'm hunting for houses.
Yes.
It's fun, right? I mean, it's when you're doing something like that you enjoy. I really enjoy work and what I'm doing. So
yeah, for sure.
What's the best business book that you've read?
Recently, it's Ray Dalio's book on principles, right? It's a deep book. It's a great book. It talks about radical truth and radical transparency. I think unless you stop, it's just this constant learning. Mm-hmm. So you just got to get started, right? People are always getting ready to get ready to get ready to get ready. Do anything, right? Like just go do something and then learn from it and then do something more and then learn from it and then do something more and learn from it. So, I think success is just a sequence of failures, right? That's it. So make it happen.
Amen. I mean, I know everybody's probably sick and tired of hearing me say it, but this is another example. That's a recurring theme that comes up on here. Don't have analysis. Really? Don't have, what is it called? Paralysis by analysis.
Analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like you said, everybody's just sitting there getting ready to get ready to get ready, you know, and they're never doing anything.
Take action.
At some point you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Right? Now don't do stupid things. You got to do things that you can survive if you make the mistake. Right.
Right.
If you take the chance, ask yourself, if this goes really, really bad, can I survive this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. From a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. And you think of all your exit plans, right? Exit strategies, then just do it. Right.
Absolutely. So Rob, how can our listeners get in contact with you?
They can go to Grid Investor Network, right? That's a way, or they can find us online at thecazagroup.com, CAZA group.com. Those two ways they'll find me, or any of our, at Grid Investor, any of our handles like that, you can find us.
Awesome. Yeah. If you guys are in the DC metro area, I mean, the Grid groups are phenomenal. So I really encourage you to check that out.
Yeah. Definitely.
Cool.
A
Thanks,
lot
guys.
of attendance every time too. So
Yep.
that's great. But Rob, we appreciate you being on the show today. It was great talking to you. And like you said, that was a short story of your career. And I know we could go several hours probably talking about it.
Well,
but,
we'll have a follow-up for sure. I want to
Yeah.
hear about all the stuff that you got in the pipeline that you're working on as we speak.
We'll do it a decade from now, right?
Yeah, decade from
It
now.
takes a decade to build some stuff,
I
right?
love it.
We'll be on
Great
show.
stuff.
We'll be on show 10,000.
Yeah,
Oh, that'd be awesome.
So,
that's right.
so
Well, junkies,
yeah,
awesome.
we appreciate
Good
it.
job.
And for our listeners, don't forget, subscribe to the show and rate and comment so that our guests know how they're doing. And also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/wealth junkies. Again, Rob, we appreciate you being on today.
Yep. Thanks so much,
Thank
Rob.
you. Thanks for having me on. Take care, guys.